They're trying to sell us something that's not the worst 2025 road bike. And here, I think a lot of people are going to have their minds blown when I tell them that the one I put there in first place is the good one.
In the automotive world, there are some promises that if they end up materializing in mountain biking, we're going to have bikes that will blow our minds.
Few people know about it since the brand is small, but it laid the groundwork for what gravel was meant to be 4 or 5 years ago. Any lightweight e-bike that comes out in 2025 is already born obsolete. 2025 has been a year when the bicycle market moved faster than ever. New models, new platforms, new promises, and as always, a lot of narrative around what is supposed to be better. Today, let's start with an uncomfortable question. Do all 2025 bike launches really make sense? Or are we seeing some brands pull too far ahead while others dangerously fall behind? No, this won't be another episode about the year's best bikes based on spec sheets or press releases. Today we'll discuss decisions, design, coherence, understanding who each bike is for, and especially who it's not for. We'll discuss gravel bikes that advance the concept, those unsure if they're mountain bikes or something else, and road bikes that have evolved, a concept that's already very, very mature, and about those who have clearly crossed the line between a professional's tool and what an enthusiast needs. We'll also cover mountain biking, where some brands show that well-known systems can still be refined, lightened, and improved. Meanwhile, others keep making excuses for poor decisions that no longer hold up. In 2025, and of course we'll talk about e-bikes, because this year has marked a turning point. What just a few months ago seemed like the perfect balance between weight and power is now already obsolete, and that completely changes the rules of the game. In this episode, we're going to point out the bikes that we believe are exceptionally well designed, not because they're perfect, but because they're consistent, honest, and move the product in the right direction. We'll also discuss the worst ones, not out of hate, but analytically. Bikes released with hard to justify compromises, unclear concepts, or solutions that don't fit the industry's current state. 2 points of view, the engineers, the testers, 2 ways of looking at the same product, and a very clear goal. To help you understand which 2025 bikes are really worth it and which ones should be viewed with great caution. This is DIVATIO, and today we are going to talk about the best and also the worst bikes of 2025. How are you, Anton? Are you ready?
Very well, Danny, I'm ready. How are you?
I'm really looking forward to it. We always enjoy talking about bicycles, right?
Yes, we like it more than our wives would like us to, but
We like it.
we're doing very well here.
Well, remind everyone that we're uploading these DIVATIO podcasts to both YouTube and Spotify. We kindly ask you to share these episodes with all your bike geek friends. We're starting from scratch, so you'll be helping us grow the project. Give us a big like wherever you are, and try the new hype button on YouTube after the hype button appears. So anything you can give us is great. Please blow up the comment section so we know if you agree with us or not. With these best and worst and best bikes of 2025, if that's okay with you. What we're going to do is alternate categories. We'll start with gravel, for example. We'll cover all the bases and in each of the categories. Anton will make a suggestion for the best bike. I'll make another one. And then I have something prepared for the worst bike or worst concept.
Let's see if we can split it up, huh?
Yeah, we have to give praise and we have to give criticism.
That's right. All right.
Anton, what do you think? Let's start with you and gravel. What do you have?
All right. The best gravel of 2025. For me, it's the iLight Able, right? I'm probably mispronouncing it. It's the bike that Alight presented this year. And for me, why is it the best of 2025? In one sentence, because it's obvious where gravel rafting is going, and it performs very well. It performs really well. And the thing is, in the tire clearance, I don't know, we've come from a time when gravel is, will they end up inventing mountain bikes? This phrase that's said a lot, not always just from the bar counter, huh? For me, gravel is the opposite. It's maturing and has already begun to segment. There's the more adventurous gravel and the more rafting gravel, and when a category starts to segment, it's a sign of maturity and hey, for gravel rafting. You can see that cross-country tires are the fastest and have been tested and proven. Amazing. And so, Alate is very brave to make that decision, to include them in this wheel arch model. I think up to 58, which is equivalent in mountain bike to a 2.25, 2.3, maybe pushing it a bit more, 2.25 or 2.2.
All right.
If you watch the promotional videos of Alite, it wasn't always that way with the decision. And of course, a marketing video can tell you anything. But anyway, in this case, if you watch the video online on their YouTube channel, it's pretty well explained. I still believe it. It's just a story and they're faking everything. But initially, the product manager of Alite doesn't see it clearly. A mountain bike tire on a gravel bike, and they run various tests, their racing team riders try it out, and in the end, they have a development that's not very dogmatic at all. That also deserves recognition to say, hey, we want to make a gravel racing machine. And during the process, they discover that this means a bigger tire clearance for wider tires. And they bravely incorporate it, adapting the geometry as such. The chainstays can't be that short, logically. Afterwards, it's also a bit longer towards the front, from the bottom bracket axle to the front wheel. I mean, the whole bike itself is longer. Today, they create an amazing racing machine and a brand. I'll finish with that. Which is pretty much the same in Europe, on the peninsula, and in Southern Europe. It's not that important, but in the United States, it's quite a major brand. And taking a step like this involves a risk. A small brand can make its own inventions, but Light is taking a step forward in gravel, and being a big brand in the United States, and with the responsibility that comes with winning and being in the peloton up there at the front from day one.
Well, it's very interesting what you're explaining about how it was actually the riders sponsored by the brand who challenged the decisions that were initially made from within the brand. I'm not sure if it was sales, product, or something else. In fact, who makes the decisions about how a bike is designed one way or another? We explained this in episode 1. Can you go check it out? I think it's really good for understanding better why some bikes or brands end up releasing models one way or another. But I think the riders get involved in the final decision. I think a lot of people are wrong about this because there are a lot of brands, whether you like it or not. I'm somewhere in the industry and notice things they're trying to sell us, which often aren't accurate. Many brands tell us things. The racing team has been involved from the start in launching this bicycle, and then you realize that in the next room they're giving the same product presentation to them as they're giving to us, the journalists or communicators. Some brands claim to work this way, though not all do. The development team has been part of the racing team, and it's pure marketing. Hasn't it been like that then, that the Alite racing team has been involved in? Huh? Please don't give me something with narrow tires, since I'll be blamed for it. On those demanding gravel roads out there? Well, I think that's a very important point to consider, and I agree with you that it's one of the launches of the year. Others have been on the field too, like those from Willier. I think the current standard is already between 50, 53, 55, 58 millimeters minimum for the tire.
As big as 58, not many though. In fact, many new releases have all increased the tire clearance, but not in a standardized way. After that, everyone assumes their own risks, using a 2-inch tire. Actually, one tire is Continental. Right now I can't remember the exact model, but there's a Continental that's highly appreciated for the Racing King.
I think it was the Race King.
But then Continental, if I'm not mistaken, has changed the names, and I've gotten a bit lost, but... Well, in any case, on the Light you can put a cross-country marathon tire, not the standard 2.4 for Olympic cross-country, but a 2.2. That's it. Let's see if now, since maybe we've gotten a bit crazy lately. With the tire width, but a 2.2, 2.25, 2.3 are already considerable tires, even for cross-country, and you can put them on the light. In fact, I haven't chosen other great gravel releases for 2025 yet. They increased tire clearance but didn't take it all the way. Being a brand, as I said before, with a large volume, it's not a niche brand. You know that this also involves some key responsibilities and risks I want to highlight.
Great. Well, Anton, I'm going to look at you. In this specific case of gravel, I'm going to come up with two proposals because I knew you were going to come with this light approach. So I want to challenge you. Two slaps, one in each environment.
I take them.
You'll see. Why? Well, because I think I have two bicycles, one that's been on the market for 4 years. It's been nearly 5 years, and for me, gravel is still the standard bicycle. Nowadays, the thing is that very few people know about it because the brand is very small, but it set the foundation for what gravel had to be 4 or 5 years ago. Today, except for the slightly exposed internal wiring, the headset and steering remain. Is it still the benchmark bike, even though many people don't realize it exists? And I'm talking about the LAUV Saegla, right? Which is a bike that I was able to test very well last year. Icelandic brand, as I said, not very well known, and a brand that launched this model. That was 4 or 5 years ago. A 2.35-inch max tire clearance on a mountain bike is just insane. And also a very generous 2.35, which still gives you enough space for good clearance, mud, and so on and so on. Of course, they had to do some really powerful engineering, especially on the right chainstay to make it fit. A single chainring with a maximum of 48 teeth, which is what the professionals are using, between 48 and 46, that's about where things are. So you can't use a double chainring on that bike, which I don't think is a problem for whoever uses it, for whoever. Nowadays,
In gravel, it's less and less common, exactly.
and yet you can fit a single chain ring of 48, 46 absolutely without any problem, and a tire up to 2.35, which is starting to seem a bit crazy to me, a bit extreme, but I think it's a bike that set those standards 4 or 5 years ago and deserves that credit, even though it hasn't come out in 2025. And on the other hand, the other slap I want to give you on the other cheek is related, but it's related to the fact that Alight is a very American brand, very proud of its country, of its origins. And they used to manufacture the carbon in the United States, which is completely unusual because we all know that basically between Taiwan and China is where the vast majority of brands manufacture. Except for a few exceptions, they would put the eagle with the stars there on the frame, made in the United States of America. Well, super proud. But coincidentally, this Apple is the first model where they've said, look, we give up. We've tried to fight. We've tried to make our own frames here. We're going to start making them in Asia. And this is the first frame they're making in Asia. So along these lines, I'm bringing you a model that hasn't even hit the market yet, as far as I know. I saw it for the first time displayed at Eurobike. We saw it again at Sea Otter Europe. I think it was at the Vision booth. It wasn't even their own booth. And I'm bringing it as a reflection of where the Laufer is following what was already there, which already had the standard. What I'm bringing is a reflection of what's to come, which is the dry Chinese brand, but not that conception of a Chinese brand as low quality, very cheap, but rather that it's quality. I don't know, not mainland Chinese brand, not from Taiwan. Also, this needs to be emphasized, Premium Directly, a brand that has several road models. They're about to launch the gravel one soon. I haven't had the chance to ride it, but I have had the chance to see the frame up close and touch the inside of the frame to appreciate how well it's built, all the aesthetic work and design behind it, and the attention to detail. Because it's not going to be a cheap bicycle just because it's from China, but it's going to be a very worthy competitor to any premium brand we can think of. To the Western mindset is a mix of both. Those are my two proposals. Also, with a wheel clearance that, without knowing the exact numbers, looks to be at least 50 millimeters wide, both front and rear.
Well, where do I start? Right? Let's see, the thing is that AID is not the first, and as you have mentioned earlier, in the end, it's a niche brand. So I can also tell you, right? If I search on Instagram in the bespoke world, well, bespoke. For those who don't know, how would you explain it well? It's this little world of people who make their own bikes with handcrafted steel.
The artisan movement in bikes, let's say.
A really cool movement that, for the cycling enthusiasts out there, who I'm sure are the majority listening to us, it's a really cool world. For example, to follow on Instagram in this small world, which even has a fair in Germany.
I don't know if it was in Dortmund. I think it was in Dortmund.
Yeah, I know they hold it very close to the airport. I'm about to go this year because it's a world that, even though I'm not a user, fascinates me. Well, for sure at UF being a niche brand, or even in the bespoke artisanal world, you find, I'm going to say oddities, but they're not really oddities. You find inventions, you find proposals, you find very creative people doing things that might eventually catch on to what are the more commercial bikes. And I'm sure you'll find bikes with huge wheel clearances. I'm sure you'll find gravel fat bikes. I'm sure you'll find cargo gravels. I mean, can a niche brand take more risks?
In fact,
the UF shown last episode features a cross-country with 2.6 wheel clearance. Alright, but the light is prominent in the United States, but less so in Europe. It's a leading brand, and when it makes proposals, a lot of investment is at stake. And it does. So that's why it's a bit unfair, because someone was already thinking that way. For me, it's 2025, not because it gets the credit for being the first, but because it comes at the moment it needs to come, taking the risks it needs to take. Yeah, kind of like that.
In fact, if you go to a higher level, if you take the UF and treat it as something very niche, light is several steps above, way above. If you look at the models from Trek, Specialized, and Canyon, most of them are limited to a maximum tire clearance of 45 millimeters. Haven't they dared to take that step yet? What do you say? Where's the risk? You'll explain the engineering. Impressive. In the bottom bracket area, the typical phrase among gravel riders is, are they going to end up reinventing or discovering the mountain bike? That's not exactly the case because there are some measurements between the bottom brackets. The chainstays, wheel space, crank space, and chainring must all be combined carefully.
Yes, with this clarification, yes, gravel. It used to be a catch-all, but now it's less so. There's a whole ecosystem of gravel specs. There's starting to be a segmentation, gravel racing, adventure gravel, basically these two. But some specific variants are also appearing, and it's becoming pretty clear what gravel is. So, increasing tire clearance? It's not about inventing the mountain bike, it's about refining and finally putting gravel in its proper place for the future, and what it has been, and what it will continue to be as well. Now, I'm going to change the subject again to respond to one of the points you've raised. To put it gently, the slaps, which is the topic of manufacturing in Asia. And here I have very little to say because it's a political issue and I don't want to get involved in that. The only thing I can say objectively is that there are a series of, fortunately or unfortunately, some people might think politically that it's unfortunately, others might think it's fortunately, I don't know. I won't discuss that. But several technologies exist in Asia that aren't in the West. And if you want to reach a certain optimization in the carbon molding process or a certain price and so on, you have to go to Asia.
So,
again, for better or worse, here, everyone has their own opinions, almost political and geopolitical. Light wanted certain levels of a product that they haven't been able to manufacture in their country or that they could manufacture,
but at a price the end consumer couldn't afford. Couldn't they compete against the product coming from Asia or against the Western brands that manufacture in Asia?
Yes, maybe part of it is cost, maybe part of it is processes, I know, because I don't know the specific case, but it's not just cost. Sometimes you search for a technology but can't find any suppliers who offer it.
But in any case, without knowing specifically, Bud Light announced this launch and the decision to go back to manufacturing in Asia about 2 weeks before Trump imposed tariffs on all imports, which went badly for them. Because maybe, I don't know. Now, it actually makes sense to manufacture in the United States again, but at the very least, they're going to have to swallow the tariff for bringing things from Asia. So, well, lately I've been finding out off the record, and I can't say the names of brands that are trying to get through, like 2 or 3 different borders, because it's cheaper for them to bring their frames through 2 or 3 borders than through a direct border. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, just to
It's more cost effective for them to pay extra logistics and tariff costs to move the product than to bring it in directly.
exactly, because obviously the highest tariffs are from Asia to the United States.
Yes, well, maybe I'm going too far, but we're also seeing with many factories that they're already moving to Vietnam because of this issue. If you want, we can do a deeper episode on Asian manufacturing someday.
Man, we'll do it, of course we will. But first, let me come with the worst gravel bike of 2025. It's surprising because it comes from a brand that I think owes a lot to gravel, specifically. I mean, for me, it's been the brand that discovered exactly what you were talking about, the segmentation within gravel. Today, this brand has, I think, 8 or 9 different gravel models in its catalog. I've been able to test a lot of these bikes from this brand in the gravel area, and I think they're top in each of the verticals they try to cover. I mean, there's no doubt that we owe a lot to this brand. But in this specific case, I think they're directly trying to sell us something that's not really their brand. I have to say it like that. We're talking about the Wrigley Ignite GTX. We're talking about a bike that, according to the data given by the brand itself, has a 58mm tire clearance, maximum equivalent to a 2.3 mountain bike tire, with a drop handlebar, obviously very wide, with a 24-degree flare and 100 front suspension, millimeters or a fully rigid option, according to the brand. 100% mountain bike geometry featuring a rigid frame and a 32-tooth chainring. And the worst part is the slogan, which says it's perfect for alpine gravel. Everything good about mountain bike geometry combined with the aero gain of a gravel handlebar. And of course, this is when my mind just blows up. Because what I think is that this is clearly overstock they have in the warehouse. Since all gravel bikes are selling really well, therefore it's being held back. A lot of the people who were buying hardtail mountain bikes to do more or less the same thing don't really know what to do with that overstock in the warehouse. And they say, hey, let's put a curved handlebar on it and say it's a gravel bike, and that way we can get rid of them. And of course, the slogan doesn't hold up because it talks about alpine gravel. I've done gravel in the Alps. I've also gone mountain biking in the Alps. And there are steep slopes. When resting, it's 10%, usually 15 or 20%. That's where things like, for example, a 32-tooth chainring make sense to climb more comfortably and so on. But then explain to me, where is the aero gain from a curved handlebar on a mountain bike? If you're climbing a 5 km/h on a 20% slope, struggling to keep your balance on the bike, not from exhaustion.
Is it Alpine, man? We just didn't get it.
Also a Belgian brand. Speaking of gravel, Alpino is kind of already on top of it. What do you think?
This isn't that gravel. It's not that catch-all where anything is considered gravel anymore. A unicycle is gravel in the end, you know? No, man.
If you add some tread to the unicycle tire, it's gravel. Be careful.
Yeah,
Yeah, alpine gravel.
no way. Gravel is very clear what it is. I mean, it's an evolution of road bikes, actually. Gravel. I don't know if it's been said a lot, huh? But I don't know if many people take it into account. Gravel exists because disc brakes started to appear on road bikes, and the arrival of disc brakes allows for a wider tire clearance. And that wider tire clearance, it encourages cyclists to ask, why not use this car-free path instead of the road? And a little bit, that's where gravel riding was born, and in the end, it has kept evolving and still is to this day. Also because of the type of events that were held in the United States which made gravel riding popular. It used to be a bit of a catch-all, but not anymore. An overstock of a rigid bike with drop handlebars isn't an alpine gravel bike. It's simply a rigid bike. That's it, it's a mountain bike. That's what we were saying before. For example, the position on a gravel bike comes from road cycling, because on the road, the position is designed to go fast without many bumps on the terrain. Gravel inherits that. It makes small adaptations like we mentioned before, with wider tires, etc., etc. There are already adaptations. But gravel isn't mountain biking, if you go to the Alps. I don't know, ride a mountain bike instead of alpine gravel? No.
I guess gravel.
They are very wide, but my point is that gravel is starting to be defined and it's not going to reinvent mountain biking. And it's no longer a catch-all.
I'll give another example of a brand that did something similar, which may seem the same to the inexperienced, but is actually very well executed. And yes, it's gravel, like for example Trek with the new Checkout double suspension gravel bike. You look at the geometry and you say, these geometries are initially inherited from road bike ancestors, which then become a rigid competition gravel bike. Finally, they relax a bit to end up with a full suspension gravel bike specifically for ultra distance races where comfort is more important than speed. But if you compare the geometry and features of that bike with a pure mountain bike with a super caliber, it's not the same. They're distant cousins, not sisters.
And with gravel, when it comes to attacking, this thing about gravel and mountain biking, well, let's see. You should realize mountain biking today is different from 15 years ago.
I mean,
everything has evolved. It's the experience, the bikes, and today we have a whole new outlook. If you want to ride trails quickly and comfortably, gravel is a variation of road cycling for you. If you want to ride single track, from Superflow, Rollo, Swiss Epic, well, I don't know if it's Superflow, I've never done it, but that's the image that comes to my mind.
not Swiss Epic. I've done it. It has some things pretty technical.
Well, but then is that what mountain biking has evolved into? I don't know, maybe a lot of people won't agree with me, but let's stop looking at the past to define where we're going, the future. Mountain biking has changed from its past form. Road cycling has evolved, and from a split in road cycling, a huge category has been born.
What is gravel?
We're already in 2025, we're here, so was all of this because of the alpine gravel topic? With this mountain bike as well? It's stretching things out, everything has been defined. There's a bike for every experience, which comes from the logical evolution of all the categories.
But Anton, it's also true that outsiders can easily get confused. During the year, we also see professional or semi-professional riders in the United States for very specific races with a very specific type of terrain, with a very specific profile. They choose mountain bikes with curved handlebars to perform better only in those races, which are 2 or 3 a year, so... But I insist, I think it's not the same. It's not the same for a racer to choose a tool based on a very specific terrain, as when a brand wants to sell you a bike frame and doesn't even hide it, they say it directly. It's our rigid mountain bike model available in the mountain bike section of the website. It's the same bike with a flat handlebar. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense from a sales point of view. And above all, being a bicycle brand that's also established in the gravel world, having contributed so much with the rest of their models and being models that work so well.
Yes, you've stretched it too far, and that's why it gets the worst gravel bike of the year, in quotes.
Great. Hey, let's move on to the road bikes. What do you think? I'll go first. Attack.
Attack.
Come on, Better Road, Best Road Bike 2025. In my opinion, it's a bike that has been completely overshadowed by its sister from the same brand. A bike that, well, we'll talk more about later, but I think it's the ideal bike for any enthusiast. The only drawback it has is that its first model, its starting price is 10,000 euros, so it's not for every budget. But based on what I've tried throughout 2025 and even part of 2024 from this whole new batch of road bikes, I think they're all generally at a very high level. I'm talking about the Aurum Magma, the Madone, for example, the 8th generation, the Giant, the new Total Compact Road. I don't know, I've tried many models, I'm leaving many out, but honestly, the Envy, for example, the Envy Melee, I really liked it a lot, also in terms of handling. But I think that above all of these, one or even two steps above, is the Colnago V5 RS. And here I can talk about many features. I can talk about the weight. I can talk about the aesthetics. I can talk about, but above all, I stick with this bike. The handling, I mean, the handling is sublime. It's a bike that you can't wait to ride and take through a series of four linked curves, right? Because it rides like it's on rails and all the others handle just as well. But this one is like two steps above. And then, well, I think it's part of this new batch, the ones that are often wrongly labeled. We'll talk about that later. Climbing bikes, that's not really the case. It's actually a very versatile bike. And that's why I stand by it, especially because of the handling. We can look at each detail. Everything is in the battle with all of them. It's one of the lightest and most aero, even if it's not truly an aero bike. But really, the handling of this bike, if you get the chance, try it out, even if you're not going to buy it. Because for me, since I try so many bikes, it's been like entering a new dimension.
Nothing to say, it's a great bike. I haven't tried it, and like you, it's about the handling. I mean, to speak properly, I should have tried it. But without a doubt, it's a bike that from the outside is completely up to date. It has everything it needs to have. And what about current wheel clearance? We haven't mentioned the weight, but I'm sure it's a competitive weight.
Now, the top of the line is right there, almost touching the Union Cycliste International, is 6.8 kilo limit, so that's not a problem. On the tire clearance, I believe it was 32 millimeters.
That's a more updated tire clearance. I'm sure it's not the one I chose, but I could have chosen it as the top of the line.
Let's see, what are you going to attack with, Anton?
In my opinion, the best 2025 road bike is the Scott Addict RC. I'm not sure if you've been able to try this one and how does it handle compared to the Grand Ole Party.
I can't compare it. I haven't tried this latest model.
For me, it's the best of 2025 because, let's see, it's really tough. Put yourself in the shoes of an engineer who has to make a road and climbing bike. It's really an exercise in automation. I'm not going to say it, I lost my train of thought. Of such extreme optimization that it's very difficult. How do you improve a road climbing bike? Scott has managed to do it and improved it significantly. What really stands out is the first thing they've done, since it's a new category they must address. It's the weight. The frame weighs, if I'm not mistaken, 660 grams, 640 or 660. Is there anyone from Scott here? Forgive me, I don't know this by heart, but it's very light. So much so that the very top model weighs 5.9 kilos and you think, okay, it's the top of the line. But the cool thing is that a commercial bike that's this light means that, the mid-range models are going to have a very competitive weight. And this, I mean, it could also be a small brand that makes a very light bike. Well, it's just for the top build and photo, which already counts. No, it's not that Scott makes a range from a dream build to something quite accessible. So does making a lightweight mass-produced bike have a lot of merit? Then regarding lightness, is it easy to make a lightweight bike? Yes, do you make a flan out of a bike? There have been cases in the market, yes, where in terms of stiffness it's practically non-functional, or you lower it a lot to the regulatory limit, the testing standards, the safety standards. Scott doesn't do either, making this optimization exercise impressive. It's a bike that's stiff where it needs to be, and at the same time, well, all of them have this now, but also stiffness, right? You don't have to choose between stiffness and comfort. The bike is stiff and comfortable where needed. Does it meet those standards? They haven't pushed it to the limit in testing. So for me, it's the best, just to wrap up, because of this amazing optimization work they've done at Scott.
As we discussed in episode 1, right? That sometimes, or most of the time, it's harder to refine a product that's already very mature. It's tough. Where do I take something away? What do I do instead of starting from scratch with a blank canvas, right?
Yes. Then, to finish, this applies to all of them in general. Well, maybe not the best. 2025. However, this optimization exercise may not be valid, and this isn't just for Scott, it applies to many others as well. Here it is. It's also worth mentioning that the optimization exercise isn't about the table itself, of the forms it has. It's not about how you make the carbon, but about manufacturing processes that allow you to achieve certain weights. And in the video you made on your channel when you went to Taiwan with the new Giant, were you able to see that? Because many times there's an innovation behind the scenes in the factories that you don't see, which allows a new generation of frames to take a step forward by weight to stiffness ratio, etc. And Scott explains it in the product lounge and in the videos that have come out. Does he benefit from this?
Yes, in fact, I'll give you an example that I found very interesting. Because when we were at the Giant factory in Taiwan, there were 3 types of places inside the factory. The ones we could visit and record, the ones we could visit but not record, and the ones we couldn't visit at all. So among the ones we could visit but not record, interestingly, it was the room where they had organized the, how should I say it, the storage of the different carbon parts. Once they had already been cut, and from there they had to be placed on the molds. I mean, they had to start the laminating process. It really reminded me of when my father was a car parts dealer and had the warehouse full of parts and references. No, I don't know about the battery or the bumper or how much they cost. I don't know about the aisles of bumpers or batteries, no. And so I found it very curious that even though there were things of very high technology and value, well, that was technological, extremely high, they didn't allow us to record how they'd organized cardboard boxes containing small sheets and carbon pieces, almost like a Lego set, you know?
Well, but it's more than that, because surely they have their own way. There's the preliminary stage, which is that level of optimization that later allows you to achieve rigidity and strength in certain places with an exact optimal weight. And then you probably saw, did you mention this, huh? Because I really liked the video you made about Taiwan.
Thank you.
Congratulations in this regard, because it's a really good video.
I think a lot of people liked it.
Yes, you see how there's been significant innovation in the carbon molding process. It means placing the carbon, closing the mold, curing it, and taking it out. And then, so as not to go on, I don't want to bore you now, as I was saying, but the molds that are placed inside the carbon have improved a lot. It lets you achieve more optimal compaction. And you can see that, as you say in the videos, there are times when you touch the inside of a frame. Before, you could really notice the roughness and the resin residue, but now, I mean, before painting, it's working really well, both inside and outside. This ability to work with carbon, both inside and outside, allows you to improve the layups, lets you keep optimizing and shaving off grams. Well, Scott, if you look at the technical releases of the Scott Addict RC, they explain how well they've done it, but well, it's not just Scott. But well, in this case, they've taken advantage of it and they're up to date. They're also leading in the development and manufacturing side.
And this also helps us explain why every time the brand launches something, they say it's more rigid and lighter. Eventually, the end user laughs, asking how it can always be both more rigid and lighter. I'm not sure if any brand is just selling smoke, but often that's the case. It is true thanks to new techniques, new technologies, or new methodologies. Simply by how things are placed, the carbon sheets or whatever it may be, you can make a frame both stiffer and lighter at the same time.
Quick comment. People need to realize that carbon bikes are an ultra-technical product.
I mean,
The carbon technology that now has a commercial side is technology from very high-end sectors. Stuff like aerospace, defense, automotive, very high-end, and the features of the bike. Can we have access to these technologies at a reasonable price? And here surely someone will get upset. But if you make a motorcycle with the manufacturing technologies used for commercial bicycles, it would be completely out of price. Well,
you'd have a Boss motorcycle.
it's a Boss motorcycle, a semi-prototype bike. Bikes create a beautiful world because we have access to technologies and manufacturing that we wouldn't have access to in any other product sector. I mean, maybe in electronics there's this level of... But anyway, I've already explained myself. I don't want to go on any longer. But the conclusion is that through cycling, we have commercial access to some really advanced technologies. And carbon is one of them. And like any top technology, it keeps evolving.
Well, I totally understand. I've gone on and on here.
But it's important.
No, with this, I'll also finish this topic, but I totally understand what you mean. The thing is, this opinion you just gave is completely unpopular because we all have the perception that bikes are too expensive. They are, they really are.
But that's just how this technology is.
But they could be so much more. Yes. Well, anyway, I think this is a topic for another time, for another podcast. We'll get to it.
We'll get to it. This is juicy and people like it. I enjoy discussing this topic.
We'll talk about it, but for now, let's continue with the bikes we have coming up now. The worst road bike of 2025. And here, I think a lot of people are going to have their minds blown when I tell them which one I put there. In first place is the Colnago Y, 1RS, the Tour de France champion bike, the world champion bike.
It's worse?
I think it's the worst road bike of 2025, and I'm not done yet. Because I keep going with the Cervelo S5 Canyon Road, Giant Propel, Merida Reacto, and BMC Team Machine. Single lens reflex, no R, sorry.
I see where you're going.
Well, the thing is that I think we're reaching a point where, and the Y1 is an example of that, we're reaching a point where professional cyclists are starting to need a type of tools that don't necessarily have to be aligned with the kind of tools that amateur cyclists like you, me, or anyone listening to us really need. What happens? Well, actually, I have an interview with Machin, the sports director of United Arab Emirates, who says it very clearly that they, from the team, pressured Colnago because they needed a different weapon to be able to compete on the better conditions in the World Tour. And that weapon was called Y1RS, and it was designed to meet the needs of the professional riders on the team. Enough. In fact, in conversations with the Colnago distributor in Spain before that bike came out, they weren't betting anything on sales. What were they betting on? Everything? On the V5 RS that was due out 3 months later? Which, as I told you, seems like a fantastic choice if you have a big enough wallet for an athlete, an amateur cyclist. And yet, in sales, the Y has taken it all, everything, because the showcase of the Tour de France, the showcase of the World Tour, as I affectionately say, Colnago's head of marketing is Tade. If he rides the Y, it will sell. If he rides the Z, it will sell too. Well, in general, I think that, my take here, or the thesis I want to defend, is that with this new wave of versatile road bikes, I don't know if the Scott can be classified as exclusively a climbing bike. For example, I think the Giant Total Compact Road is a climbing bike like they used to be conceived in the past. It has to be good at climbing. But there are many others like the Canyon Endurance, or for example, as I've experienced very closely with the BMC Team and Machine single lens reflex, the Colnago V5 RS itself. Many others, which are no longer climbing bikes, are versatile and really on flat terrain they perform very well and they climb just as well as a climbing bike. The ones that have gone to the extreme, in my opinion, are the ones we now call aero. All these that I mentioned, which for me are the worst bikes, just so we're clear, it's not that they're worse because they're bad bikes, but because they're muddying the concept of what would be the right bike for the end user enthusiast. So I don't know. That's my thesis. I don't know how you see it.
When you first said why was the worst of 2025, I was like, what? But now I see your point, and I agree with you. Look, on the road something happens that doesn't happen in mountain biking. The segmentation by categories makes sense for the experience you're going to have. Enduro bikes are suited for one terrain, while cross-country bikes are for another.
On the other hand,
On the road is the same. So, this segmentation that is done makes a lot of sense for professionals, but it makes very little sense for 99.9% of users, even those who are semi-professionals and are very strong. Incredible. So, there's this thing that happens, which is kind of a cliche, where people buy the bike, not the one they need, but more in an aspirational way,
in
road. And that's very clear in the new batch of Aero. These are bikes that make sense for the World Tour, and sometimes not even that, because they also change depending on the race. So, I don't know, it's a shame because like I said, choosing a bike is going to determine how much fun you have. So,
I think that a lot of times the issue of weight also comes up. And nowadays, a lot of people say, well, an aero bike weighs the same as a climbing bike. Well, it depends because maybe the top of the line models are close, but many times those aero bikes that are so close in weight to the climbing bikes, it's not due to the frame, but to the components and other factors. I mean, if we really compare the brands that have two models, the frame kit of the climbing bike or the all-rounder, with the frame kit of the aero bike, the lightest one is always the all-rounder, not the aero one. Then, if you go down categories and start using more basic components, the weight of the aero bike usually increases a lot more. But even leaving the weight argument aside, we're talking about, for example, comparing the Y with the 5 from Colnago. The Y is practically a triathlon or time trial bike with very complex setups that basically require what a professional team has, which is a team of mechanics around you. It's not a bike for example, hey, I went to Gran Canaria to do a Gran Fondo, now I put it in a box, and so on. When you take it out over there, it's a whole hassle. Tightening everything properly, adjusting it to your measurements, checking the special handlebar, and making sure nothing broke. However, you have another bike that's still amazing, like the V5, which is simple in the sense that once you set it up, it's straightforward. I've adjusted it so I know it will work. I don't have to worry about body positions or similar things. So I don't know, it's a combination of things that I understand the aesthetic part, but deep down, they're the versatile ones, not just the ones we've mentioned. Even the brands that have only one platform, like the Tarmac in Specialized or the Madone Generation 8 in Trek. These are bikes that I think fit much better with what we users need. Anton, have you ever had or do you have an Aero? I've had an Aero before, and deep down, I'll probably get another one.
yeah, as they say, the shoemaker's son goes barefoot. No. No, I had an Aero, I sold it, and now I have a climbing bike. But, well, actually, that's true too. If we do the 2026 episode, what's the best road bike of 2026? I'm really looking forward to being able to say it's a bike from a category that's disappearing, which is an endurance bike. Because in road cycling, endurance, and now it seems like I'm jumping ahead. But not really, because I want to relate this to the topic of segmentation within road cycling. And I think many users benefit a lot from an endurance bike, but endurance bikes for some reason are relegated to the lower range. And to counter this push that has been towards aero brands, we want endurance bikes that are awesome. We want top builds with endurance bikes to counter this. Because in the end, like I said, the road is the same. It's not like a mountain bike. The terrain depends on the category. Yes, it changes, and it's about having bikes that work well for the general public. There's also a forgotten category that's been overtaken by gravel and is now even more overlooked. With this new generation of aero bikes that are impressing a lot of users, which, to counter a good one, a good generation of endurance bikes would really be worth it. I don't know, that would be your opinion, right?
Now, to wrap up these requests, if they could allow a maximum tire clearance of about 40 millimeters and fit a slick tire, but a 40 so you could go off-road from time to time. For that category, endurance, with a look that also resembles something more sporty and not so much like a recreational ride.
Yes.
Maybe we're asking for too much.
Previously, we stated that gravel is well defined for 2025, but now we're requesting a semi-gravel road bike. And we're still going to come up with a new category, like alpine gravel.
Very good, man. Very good, Anton. Best mountain bike of 2025 for you. Let's see.
Alright, let's jump to mountain bikes. For me, I have no doubt. Is it the Specialized Stamp Jumper? Maybe for the listeners, since most of us are from Southern Europe, it's not as strong a category as it is in Northern Europe or in the United States, just like trail bikes. But for me, the 15th generation, am I saying that right? The 15th generation of Stamp Jumper continues to be the benchmark for trail bikes. Thank you once again. It's not easy, it's hard to get there, but it's even harder to stay there. And Specialized with Extra Tail have done it again. Why? Look, what I like is what they haven't done. How do I say this? I mean, they're still on top without making things complicated. The kinematic suspension system is, for me, the king of suspension systems, which is the 4-bar. Whether it's with horse link or split pivot, both variants, keep it there. And besides, they add this whole thing about the Genie shock absorber, which in the end is just a shock absorber with a big air chamber. And, well, you need to have a system that makes changing the tokens very easy. The bike feels very plush. I don't know how to say it in Spanish. It's very comfortable. Plush, I don't know. I get another name at the start of the ride, and it also limits you from bottoming out everywhere. In other words, to sum up, they keep the kinematic system, and on top of that, they refine it, adding the Genie, which only adds. It doesn't take away. In any case, it doesn't take away. Then, in terms of volumes, they do something that only the big brands do, which is that there is no wasted space. It also has a distinct DNA. Now, I'm speaking as a designer, not just an engineer, though that's part of it too. Can they optimize the bike? Every space is used. There's no unnecessary use of carbon while maintaining the brand identity. And that's also difficult. It's difficult because it's very tempting as a designer. Or, as I said, maybe this is more about design than pure engineering. Adding features to the bike to highlight the brand ends up being unnecessary.
I mean,
It's very well optimized. And at the same time, it keeps that brand identity. For me, that's the best mountain bike.
I can't argue with you about that. Is it the cycling equivalent of the mountain bike, like the Ford Model T? The first one, if I'm not mistaken, the first mass-produced mountain bike, and the one that started it all for the general public, and that it's still around and still has those features. Another thing is whether we in Spain really appreciate it, because it's a bike that's used more or less. Here we're more into the epic, right? But I totally agree with you. I'm gonna bring the one that, well, is probably one of the mountain bikes I've put the most miles on this year. And to the eyes of that user who's leaning on the bar with his elbow and holding a beer in his other hand, well, it's received a lot of criticism. Well, not criticism, but people say they haven't innovated at all. they've just copied. This one looks a lot like the other one, and honestly, I think there's a lot of important development work behind it. Things that might not be so noticeable to the eye, but when you get on the bike, you can really feel them a lot. I'm talking about the Giant Anthem. We've all seen the launch, and now it's recently become world champion with Alan Hatherley. For me, it brings two super important innovations. The first is the weight. It's a bit like what you were talking about, being able to work really well on the entire internal part of the frame, in this case with Giant. All the technology they developed to make the total compact road bike the Climber, they've applied it to the Anthem. And that's something that, like you said about the Scott, on the road, the weight of the whole range goes down because they've also managed to keep it that way. The entire range has just one carbon frame made from a single high-end carbon type, or the same frame Alan Hatherley used to win the world championship. It's in the whole range, and whether you like it or not, if there's a difference of 200 or 300 grams, you're going to benefit from that. Even if you buy the brand's entry-level model, which in other brands might use three types of carbon, you still just get the first model. It's heavy, and no matter how much you upgrade it, it never becomes top of the line, right? But above all that, there's a very specific issue which, well, I explained in the video, but I don't know how much people really care about it, which is how did the engineers manage to isolate the flex of the stays in a single pivot system like the one on the Anthem? And you can probably explain to us better why that's so important. Thank you, because if there was anything in the Giant presentation, it was, for example, a sign saying the stays of our single pivot Anthem. They flex 5 mm, while the Epic 8 from Specialized flexes 5 mm. If you could share your engineering expertise, why is this important?
Alright, about the carbon flex. When carbon flexes, it's like a wild goat. Why is it like a wild goat? Imagine a bow that you pull back, and when you let go of the string, all the energy you've stored is released just like that. There's no damper, there's no cushioning in that energy. So in suspension systems, it's basically the same, just flexing the carbon. It introduces some parasitic forces, which is kind of an ugly name, but it's very descriptive. That's what they are in the system, because they're parasitic forces, but they're forces that aren't, they have no way, they're not damped, you know? So the less it bends, the fewer parasitic forces there are.
So,
You, as an engineer, for me, the goal you have to pursue is to try to prevent them from appearing as much as possible. And if they do appear, to try to keep them under control as much as possible. But if they can disappear, even better. So, Giant sees this, I hope all the brands see it, and they also solve it and explain it. I'm not sure I explained it well or if I missed anything.
to help people understand, especially in cross country, there's always a debate between a pivot with flex, seat stays, or a linkage. A very light system, the lightest you can have, but in terms of feel and performance, it might not be the most optimal. And on the other hand, we have the more complex systems, double linkages, 4 bars, and so on that we can find. Well, how should I know? Mondrakers, BMCS, but they're sublime when it comes to reading the trail, the terrain, managing everything that impacts the rear axle, but the big downside is the weight. So, of course, from my point of view as a bike tester, what I've noticed is that with the Anthem, having a single pivot with so little flex in those stays, the feeling is very, very similar to a complex system, even with the reduced weight of a single pivot. Why? Well, mainly because when climbing, the rear wheel has incredible traction. In areas with a lot of steepness, typical loose terrain and so on, the rear wheel grips really well. And then in areas, maybe for example, with lots of small bumps in a row, you have the bike under control. It's like it doesn't push you forward like a wild bull, but it really absorbs. I mean, it compresses and rebounds, but in a controlled way. It compresses in a controlled way, which is what you engineers have achieved. But then when it rebounds, the force it generates pushing you forward, is that not controlled, or is it to a certain degree, let's say?
Yes. Look, it's also a single pivot system. Don't expect miracles from it. No matter how much you've eliminated the carbon flex,
I mean,
in a single pivot system, eliminating these parasitic forces from carbon flex. I mean, just saying that name makes it sound terrible. And are there good bikes? Single pivot ones? Well, I'm getting off track. The single pivot system gives what it gives. And actually, it benefits a lot from a remote control. A three-position system, because let's say the three positions of the shock absorber make up for what the system itself doesn't provide exactly. So, within this single pivot system, if you eliminate the carbon flex, well, it works better, and if not, you eliminate it as well. Before, I used to say control it, and that's to control it. Basically, what you do is understand at what point in the travel it flexes. If it flexes a lot at the start or end of the travel, ideally, it should flex only at the end. Because then, since these forces come in series, I mean, first the carbon flexes, I mean, the force goes into the wheel. First, the carbon flexes. When carbon can flex more, it acts as a shock absorber in series. So you want it at the end where it starts to flex. When the system's forces are already high, it's better to keep carbon from flexing. And remember, you're building a single pivot to maintain control. I mean, if you want good anti-squat properties in relation to anti-rise, if you want good properties of independence both for pedaling and braking, which would be anti-squat and anti-rise, a single pivot only goes so far. That's why I was saying, for me, the best system is when you put a pivot point that allows you, I'm rambling, cut me off. It's about putting a pivot point that sets the force bar. Whether it's in the horse link or in the split pivot, it gives you that ability to separate anti-squat and anti-rise. Wow, that was a rant. Let me know in the comments if you want me to tone it down. Because maybe what I'm visualizing here, I'm just trying to express it the same way. People wonder what this guy is saying and think he should be quiet.
we'll keep improving and refining. People can comment to tell us what's missing, if we're too technical, or if we need to explain things more clearly. I'm not sure, but the comment section is yours, and all feedback is welcome. Let's wrap up this topic. What I find most interesting is that the improvement of this single pivot really does depend on the bike brand. Until recently, single pivots mainly improved because shock absorbers got better. Thanks, see you then. In this case, it's actually the bike brands, in this case Giant, the bike brand, that directly intervenes to improve their single pivot. Point for Giant.
Thank you for watching. We'll keep talking.
But if you want, we can move on.
I was going to say more about Giant, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, we'll do more because we'll do more. Anton gets the worst mountain bike of 2025, at least from my point of view. A bike that was released this year, and it comes with something that I think is no longer acceptable in any way. We're gonna talk about a brand that, well, we can say it's not a top tier brand, but still it's a top seller, a super seller. The thing is, at least in our geographic area, it doesn't have a presence, but it's a brand that in Asia and Latin America, as far as I know, is really well established and sells a lot. What happens is that, well, we're talking about the Polygon Syncline Doctor. This is a brand from Indonesia. I got to know it and rode it for the first time on a fab bike on an island in Indonesia, where due to regulations and other reasons, you can only get around by donkey or by bicycle. And since the island is sandy,
I met Daniel Race on an island in Thailand just riding a bicycle. But that's another story.
right, Indonesia, I made a mistake. This is Indonesia.
Yes.
Well, there are videos of that from many years ago. What I mean is, a fab bike is probably one of the few real use cases that actually makes sense on an island like that, which is full of sand. Honestly, with a regular bike, we wouldn't have been able to move forward. Exactly, and Alaska's snow, so Polygon Syncline Doctor, a cross-country bike from this Indonesian brand, which, as I said, sells a lot. If you look at it, you'll probably say, well, Danny, but it's an open mold. You can't expect much from this bike. I don't really care, even if it's an open mold, launching a bike in 2025, where the wiring runs on the outside in the part that crosses, let's say, from the front triangle to the rear. This is not acceptable. I mean, I think that's something we've already moved past. We've seen this in models from 2 or 3 generations ago from familiar brands like Orbea Ois and Cannondale Scalpel. Even with better cables, even if they were on the outside, they were better organized. I don't know, the idea was better. Here they release a bike a month ago, literally, almost in 2026, with a big cable sticking out. It's ugly, it doesn't add anything, and I don't know how you see it, Anton, but honestly, I wouldn't buy it just because of that.
Let's see. About the cables, there are some integration standards that we've already achieved, so all the bikes, and I'm not even getting into the cable issue. Whether through the head tube or through the side. That's a much bigger topic that we can also discuss another day. But when it comes to integration, there are some standards, and hey, if you don't meet them, you're kind of out. I'll also say there's a type of user, but well, I'm not sure if that's the case with this bike. Above all, more of a downhill rider who wants the cables on the outside. And that makes sense for people who compete in downhill. Because if you have to change the cable, I mean the brake, or bleed it, you just change the whole thing and put it back on. You don't have to bleed it, etc. But, well, these are contexts, like I said, very racing, downhill, almost a bit niche for the rest of the segments. Hey, there are some integration standards that people more or less appreciate.
I can't imagine being responsible, whether it's in sales, marketing, or product, for a brand. And for that idea to come up in 2025 and say, yes, yes, we approve it, let's go ahead with the cable on the outside, I can't imagine it, but well, to each their own. Listen to me, Abeeks, what do you think? Should I go ahead?
Should e-bikes go first?
Let's see the best bike of 2025 everything and still not be the best. Because I think, let's see, we all know what happened in 2025 with the e-bikes, with the Abinox motor, and therefore I think that any bike that claims to be the best of 2025 has to have the Abinox electric system. What happens is that in this particular case, I'm choosing it because it was the Trojan horse that brought us the Abinox system, but not because its bike part is the best on the market. But anyway, the Amflow PL, choosing Troya, it had to be there for what I just said, basically because DJI Barra, Abinox presented their motor to the rest of the leading brands. None of them accepted the idea or wanted to take the risk, so they built their own bike and said, now you'll be amazed. They've completely disrupted the e-bike industry. So that's my proposal. That's all from me.
Before I share my proposal, which is also a motorized bike, Abinox. I want to say that the world of e-bikes is at a spectacular moment. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, and it's also reaching a point of maturity.
Are you saying that, Anton, because neither of us invested in e-bikes? They've invested away from Abinox, and they're going to hate me.
They're going to hate me.
From the outside, he's in a beautiful moment.
I make my statement, and a lot of people are going to hate me, but well, I'm not going to say something I don't believe either. I was saying it's a really beautiful moment because until now you had to choose between what you wanted, power or lightness. You had to choose, and people have said, well, not people. The market now has offered both power and lightness. Let's see how we got here. There was a moment, I don't know, I'm making it up, well, not really making it up, but just to say something, between 10 and, well, not that much, between 10 and 5 years ago, when e-bikes appeared. Thinking, well, this is something new, maybe we're going to attract a lot of people who are coming. I make up from motocross.
That's right, many people do arrive by motorcycle.
Yes, but at that time, for example, a new user profile, someone coming from motocross. Would a 28 kilo bike still seem light to them?
Really?
And then they appeared, well, the bikes at that time were pretty massive. Some brands, already knowing that, even made designs that are very different from what people usually imagine a bike to be. In response to that, lighter ones started to come out. No, it's electric, yes, but it's a mountain bike, it's cycling, and we're going to play by the rules of mountain biking. Therefore, the first thing we have to do is reduce weight. And that's when this generation of lightweight bikes came out, and then there was this dichotomy between lightweight or power. And now we are at a moment of... That's why I've decided on beautiful, because now it's not just lightweight. I mean, it is lightweight. Sorry, let me say it right. It is lightweight and powerful. You don't have to choose anymore. And so the future is bright in this sense for the C-bike mountain bike. And in the end, they're only going to improve the user experience. Yes, I always insist on this, but that's what matters. It's about people getting on it. Go out to explore nature and have a good experience because the tool allows you to do more things. And has cycling benefited from being light power? We're not going to create super motocross hybrids, and we're going to do cycling with the capabilities of a powerful e-bike that the lighter ones weren't reaching.
Even aesthetically, this is something you've mentioned to me off the record, the victory of cycling over motorcycling. Because e-bikes at first might have tried to look more like a motorcycle to attract that biker audience. In the end, they're looking more like bicycles, and we're going in the opposite direction. No, the battery keeps shrinking, making it harder to distinguish an e-bike from a regular bike.
Of course, that's normal. It's just evolution. At first, there's this device that lets you go up the mountain. What do we do with it? Where do we put it? Where do we draw more from? From motorcycling, from bicycles, from here and there. And little by little, in a sort of Darwinian way, the concepts have gone one way, they've been refined in another direction. Battery technology has also improved alongside. We're not from the cycling industry, but we take cues from the automotive industry, especially regarding electric cars. And we're at a very exciting moment. As I mentioned, conclusions about this mature product have already been made, and it just keeps improving. I just hope that another day we can also make it happen again. We can talk about it on the podcast. It's about battery technology, which is also important in the automotive world. There are some promises that if they come true in mountain biking, we'll have bikes that will blow our minds.
We'll talk about it, but first tell me, what's the best bicycle and bike of 2025 for you?
For me, it's the one with DJI one mid one. That's the one mid. It's a bit like what happened to me with Alight because I've seen the pre-release videos and I believe them and I liked what I saw in the pre-release. Did the bike need to use the Bosch SX? In the middle of development, wow, DJI comes out and Cesar Rojo, who's leading this project, decided no. This is best for the bike and matches my idea of the ideal bike. The DJI is more faithful to this ideal idea and also has this flexibility to change it, and it does what it's supposed to for me. An enduro machine, I mean, nowadays, I don't know, it's hard to justify for an enduro rider not to prefer going with an electric bike like this instead of a regular one, isn't it?
Well, nothing to object. In the end, I think out of all of them, if we had to pick two bikes with the Avinox system, number one is pure class in every way. Without even getting into the kinematics and all that, or looking at the bike, wow, it's incredible.
On a kinematic level, I also like it because it has the same personality as its aesthetics. The look is completely different. You either love it or hate it. And kinematically, what it does is also very interesting. And in fact, it has some features that a rider who goes really hard in enduro will like because it's very progressive. And that means if you're not riding very hard, you might not use all the travel, but if you do go hard, you're not going to bottom it out easily.
Well, let's see. What do you think about Pure Bike's proposal for 2025, which isn't just a single bike, but a whole category? And I think that with all this context we've had since the Abinox engine appeared just a few months ago, as you said, you no longer have to choose between power and weight, since you now have a full power bike at the 20 kilo limit. I think that any lightweight e-bike that came out in 2025 is already obsolete from the start. It's a segment where I don't see much of a future, and I don't know to what extent it's actually working in terms of sales right now.
I agree. Well, especially in mountain biking, gravel, and electric road bikes.
Yeah, that's a different story.
Yes, for mountain biking, that's right. You no longer have to choose. There are options now and more coming. There are bikes with power, like with the Abinox motor, and there will be even more. Without having to go for a top build dream build like Danger Home, you know? You have a competitive weight that allows you to have a mountain bike user experience, not a semi-motocross one.
Yes, we're talking about 100, 110, depending on which motor we're talking about. With an 800 WH battery, you can easily ride for 2.5 to 3.5 hours, depending on assistance mode, with a bike weight in that range. In the case of Abinox, it's around 20 kilos with Bosch, maybe a little more, but of course, the lightweight ones that were there between 50 to 16 batteries of 300s, 5300s, 99 to 400s, 400s, 49 to 400s, 49 to wash in the end. They don't really give you that extra push of speed, that feeling. However, the battery life was quite limited. And even that first argument about bicycle and e-bike, for those who are sporty and already have a traditional cross-country bike, I just don't see it either. Because, for example, I could fit that profile and I want my super caliber cross-country bike. When I ride an e-bike, I want full power to go up trails at 24 kilometers per hour.
And then, one thing that's also very important is that in the end, the e-biker groups are already formed, and you are left behind 100.
100.
And that's no longer technical, it's social, but it can end up being a much more valid argument than anything technical. And it's just that I want to go with my friends.
That's it. Yes. Okay. That's it.
That's it, there's nothing more to discuss, but I just don't know what, right? I mean, you ended up being the odd one out, and it's not cool. I mean, in the end, I'm telling you, I insist a lot. Enjoying biking means having fun, building a community, and riding with your group, even if you fall behind sometimes. You were either extremely strong or you weren't. Great.
Very well. Anton, well, I don't know. I think we've done an important review here, right? I'm not sure how people will react or if they'll agree with us. We'll find out in the comments. Should be interesting.
I'm curious. Let's see what they say.
All right, then. Let's get ready for the next episode. See you in a few days and be very happy. Bye bye.
Goodbye.